Hello everyone and welcome. Make a cup of your favorite drink and get comfortable because this is a wonderful time for news stories from Yellow Cat. Send your own stories in the comments below and maybe they'll be in our new video. Who is the worst neighbor you've ever had and what did they do to become so? When I lived in Columbia, South Carolina, my girlfriend, ex-girlfriend now, and I got a great deal on a 2,500 square foot rent house. It was $650 for the first month, with only $650 down as a deposit, followed by $999 a month. The house was an awesome 2-story, a jacuzzi tub in the master bath. This is where the funny stuff begins. When we were looking at the house, the next door neighbors on the right of us came out in the yard and just stood there while we looked at the house. At the time, we were like, they must be curious as to who was looking at the house. Well, we signed a lease and moved in. During the move-in, I noticed their curtains would be cracked open, and if you looked that way, they'd shut. I figured it was just their kids being snoopy. Once we were all moved in, I went next door and introduced myself. It was a rather cold meeting, and I had a weird feeling about them. After probably 2 weeks of being there, I got a letter from the homeowners association telling me that I couldn't park my commercial truck in the driveway. It was a little white Ford Ranger with a single logo on the door. I talked to them and told them what I had, and they said someone had reported that I had a very large commercial truck in the driveway blocking their view of the park on the corner. Once I cleared that up, I thought I was good to go. Boy, was I wrong! I started parking my Ford Ranger out on the street so that I wasn't blocking anyone's view, and then I get another letter. It stated that this was another warning about my commercial vehicle, and that now it's parked in the street blocking access to someone's driveway, and that the homeowner had to park in the street versus parking in their garage. Now I knew who it was. I was rather upset at this BS, so I cooled down, and later that evening, I went next door to talk to them. I rang the doorbell, and I heard someone behind the door. All I got was, "We have nothing to say to you, sir." Well, I cleared out the garage ASAP so I could park my truck in the garage to put an end to the issue. So that left my personal vehicles in the driveway. An AA Yellow 97 Ranger Rover HSE and a Silver 04 Discovery Series 2. Then I got a complaint again that stated I had vehicles with loud exhaust and it was waking people up in the neighborhood whenever I'd leave or come home at night. Plenty of people on that street had Harleys. I once again talked to the homeowners association and told them what I had, and they aren't loud. I even had them come over to visit me. I told them the neighbors must be the ones reporting me, and they said they couldn't release that info. I stopped getting letters, but if I saw those next door neighbors, they'd either go inside or give me the stink eye. I just said to heck with them and moved on with my life. So, almost a year goes by and it was time to trim up the backyard. We had a tree that was right on the fence line, so it hung 50-50 over the fence. Well, I did the nice thing and trimmed it on both sides while I was up on the ladder. One small branch fell over into their yard and it was so small I thought nothing of it. Well, the next day, I walk into the backyard to find the branch with a little note attached to it telling me how rude it was to butcher that tree without asking them. I threw the branch back over the fence and said very loudly, "F you!" Then I became friends with the neighbor on the other side of me, and I finally got the story on what the H is going on. The owner of the house had basically been in a common law marriage for 13 years. The next door neighbor was her sister. Well, apparently the woman that was living in the house we were leasing won a free trip to the Bahamas for 2 weeks. When she got back, the locks were changed. Her common law husband went and got married while she was away and basically moved all her stuff out to a storage building. Then he moved the new wife in, and basically anyone associated with him or that has is bad news in the neighbors' eyes. Well, they got so much flack from the neighbors that they had to move out and rent/lease the house. Well, it just got worse. My friend came over and parked his freshly detailed and new truck in front of my house. We went into town, and when we came back, the next door neighbor was using a leaf blower and blowing the dirt, leaves, and trash all over my friend's truck. I said, "OMG dude, they're crazy and just be cool." He got out and went over there and was like, "What the H are you doing?" She screamed, "You're blocking my driveway and I'm teaching you a lesson." He wasn't anywhere near her driveway, so he just screamed, "Turn that D thing off." When he opened the door to get in his truck, she stuck the leaf blower inside the cab and filled it full of dirt and leaves. My friend blew up, rolled the windows down, and said, "F you," and he just got the leaf blower to the face, and she screamed, "OMG, he hit me!" Well, when she screamed that, he floored it and didn't even notice that she had placed a trash container in the front of his truck. He ran that sucker clean over and it went flying into her yard, barely missing the front window. Then I looked over and saw her husband filming everything. Well, I ran into the house, called my buddy, and he was like, "OMG, dude, what the H?" So I jumped in my truck and met up with him at his house. After 15 minutes later, 3 cop cars pull up and knock on the door asking for my friend. He comes out and they start asking him questions. Then out of the blue, the weirdos pull up and start screaming. I have no idea how they got his address. Anyways, the cops had to separate everyone and get each side of the story. It basically came down to her calling 911 and reporting that she was beat up/M'd while she was doing yard work. We told them the truth and said, "Heck, get the video from her husband and watch that." The cops were like, "They filmed it?" I don't know if they ever watched it, but they let me and my friend go, and I could tell they were peed off being called out on such a BS call versus a true emergency. Well, after that, our lease was up, so we decided to get the heck out of there. During the move, I had 2 very job-threatening calls placed to my boss saying that vehicle blah 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 was driving around drunk in the neighborhood and that I was driving up to people's yards. I had to take a pee test and my boss said, "One more phone call and I'm gonna have to fire you." I told him what was going on and he said it doesn't matter and that any calls regarding reckless driving in a company truck equals termination. So for the rest of the move, I didn't use my company truck. I borrowed my friend's truck, and on the last road, I looked up and had an audience. The neighbor was out in the middle of the street in his PJs filming me load/pack my truck. I went inside, grabbed the brightest flashlight I could find and a canned air horn. I hid it all under my shirt, started up the truck, and I couldn't get out of the driveway without running him over, so I rolled down the window, blinded him, and then blew that air horn a foot away from his face and said, "F you, you crazy psycho." Of course, I had a call into my work about me driving again, but this time I wasn't in my truck and the GPS showed that my truck was nowhere near the old location. I moved away and never went over there for probably 6 months. Then my friendly neighbor was having a party and he invited me. Well, I arrived an hour early and just to see if nothing changed, I parked across the street in my new truck. I saw the curtains open and then the garage door opened and out pulls the film crew. They were trying to get my license plate number so they could call me in for some BS, but I had the front one removed due to my winch. They pulled up next to me and were like, "What are you doing here, a-hole?" I replied, "It's a public street and I can park wherever I want to." Learned that from the cops. I bailed out and ran to the back of my Jeep. He pulled forwards and I said, "Go ahead and try to get my license plate, Eric." He got mad, his wife screamed something, and they drove off. I then parked in my friend's driveway, and before I went into the party, I changed my rear plate out with an old one I had from the '97 Ford. Didn't drive with it, but I wanted to test something out. About 30 minutes into the party, I see Eric sneaking down the sidewalk with a camera. He gets behind my Jeep and snaps a few pictures off. I bet he looked like a fool calling on a vehicle/license plate that was 5 years old. My mom owns several Malamutes, big dogs like huskies. They have kennels and run in the backyard. They howl when there's a siren and bark a little when they're being fed. Been there for 20 years and no one ever had a problem. Several yippy dogs made a lot more noise. Then, the trailer trash moves in across the road. Animal control is called out 3 times a week. Every time they come, they sit outside, hear nothing, and leave. Finding that didn't work, she started calling the city when our lawn went a week without being mowed. Said a bush on city property needed to be cut down because kids were almost dying because they couldn't see in traffic. It was about 3 feet tall with nothing but a mailbox anywhere near it. Screams profanities at my mother every time she's working in the yard. The neighbors I used to have had a huge property dispute with us. They were obsessed with their property line, and if we cut their lawn even a micrometer, they were on our A about it. Anyway, they ended up putting up a bright white fence to separate our properties, which made it look really weird because this is one of those cookie-cutter house neighborhoods and there is no fences, except now for our house, which has this stupid white fence. A couple of winters ago, the snow got pretty bad and the hill we had from all the shoveling was pretty high. Once the snow melted, we discovered the fence had been crushed under all the weight. It was bent and all sorts of effed up. They actually tried to sue us for breaking their fence and failed miserably. Luckily, they moved out, but they kept their stupid fence, which looks odd. I had this crazy neighbor living next to a rental house I lived in for a while. He was your typical 80s butt rocker grown up. He had a long mullet and usually went shirtless while wearing cut-off jean shorts that showed way too much leg. His lawn was perfection. The guy cared more about his lawn than anyone I'd ever seen. I would wake up and look out the window to see the man with a measuring stick and a pair of shears hand trimming the grass around his sidewalk. While he did this, he blasted things like AC/DC and Aerosmith out of the speaker system he had hooked up all around the outside of his house. This was early in the morning too. We're talking 6 to 8 a.m. in the summer. The effer had speakers hanging off the sides of his house so he could listen to music while tending the lawn, which, of course, needed to be loud to hear over the mower, weed eater, and leaf blower, which he used to blow debris over to my lawn every morning. Speaking of his sidewalk, the guy got a citation for painting the sidewalk green because the green looked better with his house and increased curb appeal. He also painted a utility pole, but only halfway up. The city came out, repainted the sidewalk white, replaced the damaged utility pole, and fined him for it. That determined little effer painted it all over again. Seriously, he did. He said the pole was technically on his property and having it natural wood didn't look right with his house. The city didn't replace the pole the second time, but they did repaint it brown. He was told if he did it again, he'd go to jail for destruction of city property. Not such a bad thing, but we currently have neighbors who have a dead tree that is leaning towards our house but is located on their property. The tree has been like this for some time and tends to sway quite a bit when we get windstorms. We're not too worried about the tree falling over because it's pretty thick, but it leans over my sister's bedroom. This wouldn't be that big of a problem, aside from the fact that my sister is traumatized by it due to some other experiences she's had with trees. So we approached them and offered to pay for the removal of the tree, plus a little more for putting it upon them to deal with the removal. We explained the whole situation to them, including the trauma it was causing my sister. They declined because the husband wasn't in a good financial situation. Now, I can understand that those kind of situations can be troubling for anyone, but really, they would have made money by accepting the offer. Kinda peeved me. It's okay though. Tree fell backwards and broke their garage. Thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing, the likes, and the comments. See you in the next video.